In the cold vastness of space, a desperate cry for help echoed across the stars. The Zorthians, an advanced and peaceful race, had watched as their once thriving colonies fell one by one to a new and terrifying enemy, the Vradak. The Vradak were unlike anything the Zorthians had encountered before, vicious, unrelenting, and utterly merciless. Their technology was far superior, and their military strategy was lethal in its precision. The Zorthians, despite their advancements, were powerless to stop them. Entire fleets had been lost in the blink of an eye, and now, with their homeworld burning, the Zorthians faced total annihilation. The Zorthian High Command had made a decision, one born from a place of desperation. They would send out a distress signal to the farthest reaches of the galaxy, hoping that another race, some unknown civilization, would hear their plea and come to their aid. Their message was a beacon of survival, broadcasting across space in all directions, hoping against hope that someone would listen. The signal traveled millions of light years across the galaxy, finally reaching Earth's deep space communication network. At first, the message was dismissed by the Global Defense Command as nothing more than a hoax, a misunderstanding, or worse, a trap designed to lure Earth's defenses into an ambush. After all, Earth had only recently begun to develop a space program that could compete on a galactic scale. A race of highly advanced beings pleading for help seemed too good to be true. But something about the message caught the attention of Dr. Allison Carter, one of Earth's leading xenologists, an expert in alien languages and cultures. She listened to the signal again, and this time something felt different. The distress in the voice of the Zorthian leader was unmistakable, a tone of genuine fear that no hoax could replicate. The urgency of the message, coupled with the long-range transmission, struck a chord in Dr. Carter. The Zorthians were truly desperate. Dr. Carter pushed to have the message investigated further. She argued that Earth had a moral obligation to assist, not only as a compassionate gesture, but as a strategic necessity. If we don't act now, she argued during a meeting with the United Nations Security Council, we risk letting the Vradak grow unchecked. If they wipe out one species, they could come for us next. Despite skepticism, the situation grew direr by the day. The Zorthians were on the brink of extinction, and without help, their knowledge and technology would be lost forever. Earth could not afford to ignore the cry for help. The Council hesitated, torn between caution and a sense of duty to help an innocent race. Finally, General James Thompson, commander of Earth's newly formed United Fleet, stood up. With a steady gaze, he looked around the room, his voice carrying weight. "We don't know what we'll find out there," he said, "but we do know one thing. We cannot let another civilization fall to the Vradak. If there's even the slightest chance we can save them, we will. We must go." The room fell silent. The weight of his words hung in the air. After a long pause, the Council nodded in agreement. Earth would respond. Earth would fight. The decision was made. Earth would send a fleet, led by General Thompson, to the Zorthian system, carrying with them not only military might, but the hope of survival for a doomed race. As the fleet prepared for launch, Dr. Carter stood at the observation window of the command center, staring out at the vast, dark expanse of space. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were stepping into something far larger than they could imagine. A sense of dread mingled with the adrenaline of the impending mission. They were about to journey into the unknown, where the fate of a civilization, perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself, could rest on their shoulders. And so, Earth's response began. A journey that would soon reveal that humanity had more to offer than anyone could have ever anticipated. The moment the United Nations Security Council gave the green light, the world's attention shifted to one single mission, a desperate rescue operation to the Zorthian homeworld. The plan was clear, but the risks were astronomical. As humanity prepared to embark on this perilous journey, questions loomed heavy in the air. Could Earth truly handle an unknown enemy like the Vradak? And if they failed, what would be left of their reputation, their future, their place in the galaxy. General James Thompson stood at the helm of the United Fleet's command center, watching as final preparations were made. His mind raced through contingencies, running calculations for every possible outcome. His experience as a military strategist made him cold to fear. But this was different. This wasn't just a mission. This was an unknown, uncharted war. And the enemy wasn't just a force of nature or an aggressive faction. It was something far darker, something with the potential to wipe entire civilizations off the map. "General, everything's in place," reported Commander Elena Vargas, his second in command. She was a no-nonsense leader, and her confidence was a sharp contrast to Thompson's internal unease. She had been with him for years, but even she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of uncertainty. Thompson nodded. "Good. We leave within the hour." Dr. Allison Carter entered the command center, her face marked with both exhaustion and determination. She had been up for days analyzing the Zorthian message, translating it, and trying to predict what they might encounter on their journey. As a scientist, she had hoped for a more predictable mission, one grounded in the familiar laws of biology and physics. But this was an entirely different challenge. "General," Dr. Carter said, stepping forward, "I've been studying everything we know about the Zorthians. From what I can gather, they are peaceful, highly intellectual, and technologically advanced. They're not warriors by nature. Their greatest strength lies in their knowledge of science and diplomacy. The Vradak, on the other hand, they're predators. They don't negotiate. They don't show mercy." Thompson leaned in, his eyes sharp. "We'll need more than intellect and diplomacy to win this. They're fighting for survival. We need to show them we can do the same." Dr. Carter's expression hardened. "And we will. But it won't be easy. The Vradak's technology is beyond anything we've ever faced. We're essentially walking into their backyard, and we have no idea what kind of traps they've set. If we fail, well, Earth won't get a second chance." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implications. Earth wasn't just sending a fleet, it was staking its future. If they couldn't protect the Zorthians, if they couldn't defeat the Vradak, they might very well become the next target. Humanity's place in the galaxy, once a quiet corner of the cosmos, would no longer be so safe. General Thompson stood in silence for a long moment, then turned to face his crew. "This isn't just about fighting a war," he said, his voice firm. "This is about showing the galaxy that we're not just another species waiting to be wiped out. This is about showing them that humanity has the power to defend, to fight back, and to survive. We do this for the Zorthians, for Earth, and for every civilization out there that might need our help one day." The Exodus and its fleet of ships cruised through the black void of space, leaving behind the familiarity of Earth and heading toward the unknown. As the journey unfolded, the crew was filled with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. The stars, usually a comforting constant, now felt like distant beacons guiding them into uncharted territory. The hum of the ship's engines, the rhythmic pulse of the life support systems, it was all a constant reminder that they were far from home. And the path ahead was uncertain. General Thompson stood in the command center, his gaze fixed on the holographic display of the Zorthian system. The projection showed a war-torn landscape, planets shattered by the Vradak's onslaught, moons burning, and the once thriving Zorthian homeworld now reduced to a smoldering ruin. The fleet had been traveling for days, and still no communication had come from the Zorthians. They were either too weak to respond, or worse, had already fallen silent in the face of destruction. "Status report, Commander," Thompson said, his voice steady but edged with tension. Commander Elena Vargas stood at the tactical station, her fingers flying across the console. "We're on course for the Zorthian system. Estimated time of arrival, 48 hours. No signs of Vradak activity in this sector. Yet." Thompson's eyes narrowed. The quiet made him uneasy. The Vradak were relentless, and he didn't believe they'd simply vanish because they hadn't been found yet. But for now, The silence was their only ally. Dr. Allison Carter, who had been quietly observing from the side, approached Thompson. "General, I've been reviewing the data we received from the Zorthian archives. From what we can piece together, the Vradak aren't just technologically advanced. They manipulate time and space. They have weapons that don't just destroy. They warp reality itself." Thompson's brow furrowed at the mention of such a power. Time and space manipulation. That's beyond anything we've seen. Carter nodded. "Exactly. That's why the Zorthians didn't stand a chance. Their weapons were conventional, and they couldn't adapt to such an unpredictable force. But we don't know what we're walking into. We need to be prepared for anything." The gravity of Carter's words weighed on Thompson, but his resolve remained unshaken. They couldn't turn back now. The mission was too important, and the risk of failure was too great. He knew that if the Vradak had the ability to bend time and space to their will, they were stepping into a battlefield unlike any Earth had ever faced. As the fleet neared the Zorthian system, the mood aboard the Exodus shifted. There was a palpable tension, a shared understanding that this was no ordinary mission. They were heading into the heart of a war they didn't fully understand, to face an enemy they knew far too little about. Every crew member felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on them, and yet there was also a quiet determination that underscored their actions. They were Earth's response, and they would not fail. At the rear of the ship, a team of engineers worked feverishly to ensure that the Terra Forge, the mysterious weapon hidden deep within Earth's military arsenal, was ready. No one outside of the highest echelons of command knew the full capabilities of the Terra Forge, but Dr. Carter had briefed Thompson and Vargas on its potential. The force was capable of channeling the raw, unbridled power of Earth's natural elements, earthquakes, volcanoes, storms, and more. It was humanity's hidden ace, a force so powerful that it could change the tide of battle in an instant. But as the fleet approached their destination, no one could predict if the Terra Forge would even be enough to withstand the might of the Vradak. Dr. Carter stood by a window, staring out into the vastness of space. The stars twinkled, indifferent to the chaos unfolding below. Her thoughts were clouded, torn between her scientific curiosity and the cold, harsh reality of war. What if the Zorthians were already lost? What if Earth couldn't stop the Vradak? What if they were walking into a trap, one that would destroy not only the Zorthians but Earth as well? She closed her eyes, pushing the doubts aside. The fleet had a mission, and they would carry it out. They had no choice. Earth's fate, and the fate of countless others, rested in their hands. "General," Commander Vargas called, her voice sharp. "We're approaching the Zorthian system. We'll be in range in 30 minutes. Thompson took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenge ahead. The unknown awaited them, but humanity would not back down. Not now. Not ever. As the Exodus entered the Zorthian system, the crew braced themselves for the horrors they were about to encounter. Earth's fury was about to be unleashed. But would it be enough? As the Exodus and the rest of Earth's fleet entered the Zorthian system, the crew was met with an eerie sight. What had once been a vibrant star system, home to an advanced and peaceful species, was now a shattered ruin. The planets that once orbited the sun, teeming with life, now appeared as smoldering husks. Moons had been fractured, and debris from destroyed satellites and starships drifted aimlessly in space like forgotten remnants of a lost civilization. "General," Commander Vargas said, her voice tight with unease, "we're getting close to the Zorthian homeworld. The readings are disturbing. No signs of life. It's as if the entire system has been sterilized." Thompson nodded grimly. "Prepare for all contingencies. This may be a trap." The fleet moved cautiously forward, scanning the system for any signs of activity. It was impossible to ignore the haunting silence that hung over the battlefield. Where had the Zorthians gone? Had they been completely wiped out, or were some still holding on, hiding in the shadows of their once proud civilization? As they neared the remnants of the Zorthian homeworld, Dr. Carter stood at a side console, her eyes scanning the data. "This doesn't make sense," she muttered. The Zorthians were known for their powerful defense systems. They could have held out much longer than this. The fact that everything's been wiped out so completely means the Vradak must have some kind of overwhelming advantage. Thompson's jaw clenched as he stared at the holographic images of the destroyed world. "And we're here to stop them. Keep your eyes open." Without warning, a ripple in space tore through the fleet's sensors, followed by the unmistakable sound of alarms blaring. The Vradak had arrived. A massive fleet materialized out of nowhere, emerging from a cloaked pocket of space, their ships unlike anything the crew had ever seen. Towering, jagged warships with sleek, alien designs formed a perfect formation around them. Their hulls shimmered with an unnatural energy, the faint outline of force fields pulsing across their surfaces. At their center was a colossal, dark vessel that radiated an almost tangible malice. The Vradak flagship, unmistakable in its dark majesty. "Red alert!" Vargas shouted, her voice commanding as the fleet's shields went up, shimmering against the incoming onslaught. "Enemy ships are engaging. Prepare for combat." The Vradak opened fire with an intensity that took Earth's fleet by surprise. Pulses of energy streaked across the black void, slamming into the shields of the human ships. The sheer power of the Vradak's weapons sent violent tremors through the Exodus, rattling the crew. "Return fire," Thompson barked. "Full power to the weapons. We hold them here." Earth's fleet retaliated, unleashing everything they had: laser beams, missile barrages, and electromagnetic pulses. But their weapons barely scratched the surface of the Vradak ships. The enemy's force fields absorbed the impact with chilling ease, and their return fire was devastating. The Exodus shook violently as a direct hit from a Vradak energy blast caused a cascade of sparks through the ship's outer hull. In the chaos, Dr. Carter's voice came through the comms. Frantic. "General, these weapons, they're not just destructive. They're manipulating the very fabric of space. I'm seeing temporal distortions. It's like they're bending time itself around their ships." Thompson's heart sank. The Vradak weren't just fighting. They were altering the laws of physics. Time and space weren't merely weapons. They were tools to break the very foundation of reality. A sudden shudder ran through the fleet. The Vradak flagship fired a concentrated beam of energy, hitting the Exodus directly. The shockwave sent the ship spiraling off course, the bridge darkening as systems failed. Thompson gripped the edge of his console, his vision blurring for a moment. The Exodus was still operational, but the damage was severe. "Damage report," he ordered, trying to regain control. Vargas was quick to respond. "We've lost several outer hull sectors. Power systems are fluctuating. Shields are down to 30%. If this keeps up, we won't last long." The situation was deteriorating fast. The Vradak weren't just formidable opponents. They were godlike in their ability to manipulate time and space. Earth's military, despite its strength, was fighting an enemy that could bend reality to their will. It was a war of survival, not just for the Zorthians, but for humanity itself. As Earth's fleet reeled from the initial barrage, Dr. Carter worked frantically to understand the Vradak's technology. "If we don't find a way to counteract their weapons, we're doomed. The Vradak are using something beyond conventional warfare. We need to disrupt their ability to manipulate time, or we'll be wiped out before we can even strike back." Thompson's mind raced. The Terra Forge, Earth's ultimate weapon, had the potential to shift the balance, but it was still untested in battle. They didn't have time for hesitation. The Zorthians had put their trust in humanity, and they couldn't afford to let that trust be broken. "Vargas, get us closer to the Vradak flagship," Thompson ordered, a cold resolve in his voice. "We're going to make them regret ever stepping foot in this system." With Earth's fleet under heavy assault, and the odds stacked against them, the time had come to unleash the raw power of the Terra Forge, if they could survive long enough to use it. The Exodus shuddered once more as the Vradak flagship fired another devastating blast, sending tremors through the ship. The bridge crew fought to maintain control, but the enemy's onslaught was relentless. Shields were nearly gone, and Earth's fleet was struggling to maintain any semblance of organization in the chaos. "General, we've lost contact with the rest of the fleet," Commander Vargas shouted, her voice strained with the stress of the battle. "Our remaining ships are scattered, and their systems are failing across the board. We need to fall back." "No," Thompson's voice cut through the panic. "We don't retreat. Not now. Not ever." His gaze was locked on the holographic projection of the Vradek flagship. It loomed like a dark colossus in the distance, its energy weapons crackling with unnatural power. Every instinct screamed at Thompson to pull back, to regroup and rethink their strategy. But he knew there was no time. The Zorthians were depending on them. Earth's future depended on them. "Prepare the Terra Forge," Thompson ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "Activate it now." The crew moved swiftly, though their movements were tinged with doubt. The Terra Forge was humanity's last line of defense, a weapon so powerful that it could shift the balance of the entire war. But no one knew if it would work. It was an experimental technology, and its capabilities had never been tested in combat before. Dr. Carter, who had been frantically analyzing the Vradek's weaponry, looked up from her console, eyes wide with urgency. "General, the Terra Forge isn't fully calibrated. If we unleash it now, we might destroy everything within 100 kilometers. We can't afford to miss." "I don't care," Thompson interrupted, his expression hardening. "We need to make them feel Earth's fury. This is our chance to turn the tide." The Terra Forge was a weapon unlike any other. Designed to harness the raw energy of Earth's natural elements, earthquakes, storms, volcanic eruptions, it could trigger catastrophic geological events on a scale that rivaled the mightiest forces of nature. But it had never been used in a real battle. Its power could either shatter the enemy's fleet or annihilate them all, including Earth's own. "We're activating it now, General," Vargas called out from the tactical station. A low hum filled the bridge as the Terra Forge began to power up. The ship's systems seemed to respond to its energy, as if the very core of the Exodus was alive. Dr. Carter, though visibly nervous, focused on the readings, watching as the Terra Forge's energy reading soared. "Let's pray this works," she muttered under her breath. With a final deafening pulse, the Terra Forge unleashed its power. A massive shockwave of pure energy erupted from the Exodus, creating an invisible ripple in space that stretched across the battlefield. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The Vradek ships, once unharmed by Earth's conventional weapons, began to flicker. Time itself seemed to bend around them as the shockwave of the Terra Forge collided with the Vradek's space-warping technology. The massive warships shuddered, their energy shields flickering in and out of existence as the fabric of space itself seemed to unravel. Thompson's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the chaos unfold on the holo display. The Vradek flagship, now exposed and vulnerable, struggled to regain its stability. It was as if Earth's fury had taken the very essence of the Vradek's power and turned it against them. "We've done it," Vargas breathed, a look of disbelief crossing her face. "The flagship is destabilizing. Their systems are failing." But the victory was short-lived. As the Vradek flagship teetered on the brink of collapse, a terrifying new force emerged. The surrounding Vradek fleet, their ships now disoriented and weakened, regrouped and began to charge up a new, more concentrated energy weapon. This wasn't just another blast. It was something far more dangerous. "General, get ready for another wave," Dr. Carter shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Their energy buildup is accelerating. They're about to fire a weapon that could collapse the entire system." Thompson's blood ran cold. They had only seconds to react. The Vradek were not finished. Their flagship, now exposed and vulnerable, had one last card to play, one final weapon capable of ripping apart everything in its path. "Vargas, keep the fleet intact," Thompson ordered. "Dr. Carter, we need a countermeasure. Now." With the fate of the Zorthians, and possibly Earth, hanging in the balance, the crew of the Exodus braced themselves for the next, most devastating strike the Vradak had to offer. The Terraforge had momentarily tipped the scales in Earth's favor, but it had also enraged the enemy. And now, it seemed, the Vradak were ready to unleash their ultimate fury. The Exodus trembled as the Vradak's weapon began to charge. Its ominous hum reverberated through the ship's metal corridors, a sound that made the hairs on the back of every crew member's neck stand on end. The Vradak's ultimate weapon was nearly ready to fire, and the results would be catastrophic. Earth's fleet, already battered and struggling, was facing an enemy that didn't just fight with superior technology. They fought with sheer destructive power. "General, their energy readings are off the charts," Dr. Carter shouted, her voice taut with panic. "This isn't just a weapon. It's going to tear the very fabric of the system apart. We need to stop them before they fire." Thompson's face was set in grim determination. He knew that if they didn't act now, all would be lost. The Terraforge had temporarily disabled the Vradak fleet, but it hadn't been enough to cripple their ultimate weapon. The Vradak were relentless. They always had a backup plan, always had another trick up their sleeves. "Commander Vargas, get us into position to disrupt their firing sequence," Thompson ordered. His voice was steady despite the chaos that surrounded him. "We can't let them fire." "We're not in a position to counter it, General," Vargas replied. "Their weapon is already in the final stage of activation. At this range, even the Terraforge won't be enough to stop them." Thompson gritted his teeth. Earth's last resort. The Terraforge had done its part, but the Vradak's weapon was beyond anything they had anticipated. He needed a solution, and fast. "Dr. Carter, you said their technology manipulates time and space," Thompson said, his mind racing. "Can we use that against them?" Carter's eyes widened. "You're not suggesting we. Can we do it or not?" Thompson interrupted, his eyes burning with urgency. Carter hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded. "It's risky, but if we can create a temporal distortion strong enough, we might be able to collapse their weapon's energy field before it fully charges. We can turn their own technology against them." "Then do it," Thompson said, his voice cold and resolute. With a series of frantic commands, Dr. Carter and her team began recalibrating the Terraforge. The idea was as dangerous as it was ingenious. By generating a counter-distortion of temporal energy, they would create a feedback loop that would destabilize the Vradak's weapon long before it could fire. As the crew of the Exodus worked to implement the plan, the countdown to the Vradak weapon's activation continued. The pressure was unbearable. Earth's fleet was barely holding on, and the Zorthian system itself seemed to be on the brink of collapse. The weight of the moment pressed down on Thompson's chest as he watched the holographic display, his heart hammering in his ears. "We're almost there, General," Dr. Carter called out, her voice strained. "Just a few more seconds." "Now," Thompson barked. "Do it now." In an instant, the Exodus released a burst of concentrated temporal energy, an inverse pulse aimed directly at the Vradak flagship. It collided with the massive warship with a violent shockwave that seemed to rip the very fabric of space apart. Time itself warped around the Vradak weapon, creating a swirling distortion in the air. The massive energy charge that had been building within the Vradak flagship began to sputter and destabilize. The feedback loop took hold. The Vradak flagship trembled, its systems struggling to maintain control as the temporal distortion spread. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the weapon might fire regardless. Then, with a final, explosive surge, the ship's energy field collapsed in on itself. The colossal energy beam dissipated harmlessly into space. For a heartbeat, everything was silent. Then, the Vradak flagship's hull began to crack and splinter. A final, deafening roar of energy erupted from the ship, but this time it was not the fury of destruction. It was the sound of a ship dying. The Vradak flagship had been torn apart from within by its own weapon, its colossal reality warping core imploding under the strain. "General, we did it," Vargas said, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. "The flagship is gone." Thompson exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle on him. They had won, at least for now. The Vradak's ultimate weapon had been destroyed, their fleet shattered. Earth's fury had triumphed. But there was no time for celebration. The remaining Vradak ships, though disoriented, were still a force to be reckoned with. They were retreating now, but the cost had been high. The Exodus and its fleet had suffered crippling damage, and many of Earth's ships were beyond repair. "We won't let them escape," Thompson said firmly. "Vargas, pursue them. They won't have the time to regroup." "Understood, General," Vargas replied. As the Exodus and the remaining ships of Earth's fleet gave chase, the crew could feel a sense of resolve growing. The Vradak had been stopped, but the war was far from over. The battle for the Zorthian system had ended in victory, but the true cost of the war had yet to be realized. Would the Vradak return with a vengeance? And what would Earth's future look like now that they had made their stand? For now, however, humanity had proven its strength. They had stood against an unimaginable foe, and they had won. The silence that followed the destruction of the Vradak flagship was deafening. For a moment, it felt as though time itself had come to a standstill. The Exodus and the remnants of Earth's fleet drifted in the aftermath of the battle, surrounded by the shattered debris of the Zorthian system. The Vradak had been defeated, for now, but the cost of the victory was apparent. Earth's fleet was in disarray. Ships were heavily damaged, some beyond repair, and the toll on the crew was evident in their exhausted faces. On the bridge, General Thompson stood still, staring at the holographic projection of the battlefield. The Vradak were retreating, their remaining ships limping away, but the victory felt hollow. The Zorthians, the allies Earth had come to save, were all but gone. Their once thriving homeworld was nothing but ashes, and the questions surrounding the future of this system loomed large. "General, we've secured the system," Commander Vargas reported, though her voice lacked the usual confidence. "The Vradak fleet has broken formation and is retreating into deep space. We've sustained heavy losses, but we've made it through." Thompson nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The Zorthians, who had once been proud allies, had been reduced to a faint memory. He'd hoped that Earth's intervention would mark the beginning of an alliance, one that could potentially unite them against the Vradak in the long term. Instead, all they had was an empty system filled with the remains of a civilization that had been wiped out in a matter of weeks. "Has anyone attempted to contact the remaining Zorthian survivors?" Thompson asked, though he already feared the answer. Dr. Carter, standing off to the side, looked up from the data she had been analyzing. "Nothing. There are no signals, no life signs. From the scans, it appears the last of the Zorthian population is either dead or in hiding, scattered among the debris. There's nothing left to salvage." Thompson clenched his fists, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. He had led Earth's fleet into battle to save the Zorthians, and they had failed. They hadn't even been able to protect them, let alone offer any hope of survival. The Zorthians had been overwhelmed by an enemy that had proven to be beyond any Earth force's capability. "General, what now?" Vargas asked, breaking the silence that had settled over the bridge. "The Vradak are beaten, but we're in no shape to pursue them any further. Do we retreat and lick our wounds, or do we push forward?" Thompson took a deep breath, the weight of the decision hanging over him. The victory they had won, however fleeting, had been at a great cost. But humanity had fought hard, and Earth was far from giving up. The Vradak had proven their ability to tear apart civilizations in the blink of an eye, and while they had been forced to retreat, they wouldn't stay away forever. "We don't retreat," Thompson said, his voice resolute. "We rebuild, we regroup, and we prepare for the next battle. The Vradak may have been driven back today, but they'll be back. And when they return, we'll be ready." Vargas nodded, her eyes meeting Thompson's with the same sense of unwavering determination. The battle for survival was far from over. The victory at Zorthian space was a fleeting one, and Earth could not afford to become complacent. "Understood, General," she said. "We'll continue the pursuit, but we'll need to reinforce our fleet, repair our ships, and re-establish communication with Earth Command. If the Vradak are as relentless as we believe them to be, we need every advantage we can get." Thompson turned toward Dr. Carter, who had been unusually quiet for the past few moments. "What's our status on the Terra Forge?" he asked, knowing that the weapon had been crucial in the battle. Its energy readings had been off the charts, and they had been lucky it had worked at all. Carter sighed. "It's holding up, but barely. The feedback loops caused some instability in the system, and we'll need to recalibrate it before we can use it again. We'll also need to assess the long-term impact it might have on our fleet's energy reserves. The Terra Forge was never meant for this kind of sustained use." "Damn," Thompson muttered under his breath. The Terra Forge was Earth's secret weapon, and they had no guarantee it would function properly in the next engagement. If the Vradak were to return with even greater force, they would need every tool at their disposal. "All right, get it fixed," Thompson said, his tone sharp. "We can't afford to waste any time. Prepare the fleet for a full repair and recovery operation. We'll have to work fast if we want to stay one step ahead of the Vradak." As the crew of the Exodus set to work, Thompson remained at the front of the bridge, staring at the empty, lifeless system that had once been a beacon of hope. The Zorthian people were gone. Earth had not been able to save them. And yet, despite the loss, Thompson felt a surge of resolve. The Vradak might have won battles, but humanity had proven that it could fight back. They would rebuild. They would adapt. And when the Vradak returned, and they would find Earth waiting. The Exodus drifted slowly through the Zorthian system, its hull battered and scarred, a grim reminder of the fierce battle that had raged only days before. Earth's fleet, now regrouping and repairing, was scattered across the system, salvaging what they could from the wreckage of both the Vradak and their own ships. The mood aboard the flagship was somber, the crew's fatigue evident in every tired face, but there was also a quiet sense of determination. They had survived. They had fought and won, even at great cost. But as the reality of their victory set in, it became clear that the war was far from over. General Thompson stood on the bridge, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The Zorthian system, once teeming with life, was now silent, a graveyard of ships and shattered planets. The Zorthian people were gone, their home reduced to a memory. Earth had come to their aid, but it had not been enough. "General," Vargas said, breaking the silence, "we've established communication with Earth Command. They've requested an immediate report on the situation." Thompson nodded but didn't look away from the empty system. "Put them through." The holographic communication screen flickered to life, and the face of Admiral Martinez appeared, her stern expression reflecting the gravity of the situation. "General Thompson," she said, her voice firm, "we've received your report. The Vradak are in retreat, but the situation is far from resolved. Earth Command is preparing for the next phase of the war. How long until you're ready to continue the pursuit?" Thompson let out a long breath. "Admiral, we've sustained heavy losses. We're in no condition to pursue the Vradak immediately. We need time to regroup, repair, and resupply. Our fleet is damaged, and we got to recalibrate the Terra Forge before we can use it again. It will take us at least 2 weeks to get back to full strength." Martinez's face hardened. 2 weeks is too long, General. The Vradak won't wait. They'll use this time to regroup, refuel, and return with even greater force. We need to keep the pressure on them. Earth Command has already begun assembling additional fleets. I want your fleet back in action as soon as possible. Thompson's jaw tightened. He understood the urgency. The Vradak had shown themselves to be a relentless, cunning enemy. They would strike again, and Earth had to be ready. But at what cost? Earth's fleet had already paid a heavy price, and sending them into battle before they were fully prepared would be a gamble they could ill afford to take. "I understand." "Admiral," Thompson replied, his voice steady. "We'll get the fleet ready, but I won't put them back into the fight until we're sure we can win." The Admiral's expression softened slightly, though there was still a trace of impatience in her eyes. "Understood, General, but don't take too long. Earth is counting on you." The communication ended, and Thompson stood in the quiet of the bridge, his mind racing. The weight of the responsibility he carried had never felt heavier. The battle for the Zorthian system had been a turning point, but the war was far from over. The Vradak were still out there, and they would not forget the humiliation they had suffered. "Vargas," Thompson said, turning to his commander, "we're going to need every available ship to assist with repairs. Dr. Carter, I want a full assessment of the Terra Forge. We can't afford to have another malfunction like that again. I want our fleet operational in 2 weeks, no excuses." "Yes, General," Vargas replied. "I'll oversee the repairs personally." Thompson nodded and then turned to the view of the system once more. Despite their best efforts, they hadn't been able to save the Zorthians, and now their home was lost. The war had taken everything from them, and Earth had been forced to fight against an enemy more powerful than they had ever imagined. Yet, in the face of all this destruction, humanity had stood tall. But Thompson knew the true test was yet to come. The Vradak would return, and when they did, Earth would need to be ready. In the coming days, as Earth's fleet worked tirelessly to repair the damage and resupply, a sense of unity began to form among the crew. They had lost allies, they had lost friends, but they hadn't lost their resolve. The Terra Forge would be ready again. Their ships would be repaired, and Earth would rise from the ashes of this battle stronger than before. The crew aboard the Exodus knew that this wasn't the end. This was merely a pause, a brief moment to catch their breath before the storm rolled in again. But Earth was ready. They had proven they could fight. And now, they would prove they could win. Thompson turned away from the view, his mind focused on the next challenge. The Vradak might have been pushed back for now, but the war was far from over. The next battle would be the true test of humanity's strength, and Earth would not back down.